Hello, everyone. Firstly, I'd like Women Who Code and I would like to welcome to our first in-person event after a really long time. How excited are you guys for this event? Spoke to some of you and I can sense a lot of excitement. And thank you so much for coming in this extremely sunny afternoon. I could see a lot of you coming in. It's like, oh my God, like water. Are you guys well settled in now? Is there something you need? No? Okay. Let's go ahead. So, how many of you have heard about Women Who Code? Wow, that's so cool. Oh, you guys can help me.
You all can come here or you
Yeah.
can move here. We don't bite, I promise. I can also give Kriti a mic. You won't trust me, you won't need a mic for me, but I can give Kriti a mic.
I can talk loudly. I just didn't want to scare the people in the front. It's okay. Yeah, just take it anywhere. You guys were like the typical backbenchers as well. Like, most corner, most place.
I won't pick on you, I promise.
Isha, you know who you need to target now. Yeah.
Psychological safety.
Okay, so how many of you know about Women Who Code? It's about like 3, 4 people here. Okay. So from the people who know about Women Who Code, how many of you have attended Women Who Code meetings earlier or events earlier? No. You have? Oh, that's great. So for most of you, this is your first Women Who Code event. All right. So I'm going to take some time before I pass on over to Isha to tell you a bit about Women Who Code.
Is it okay? Hang on. No, where's my pointer?
Technical
There. Okay,
difficulties,
there we go.
right?
It should work now. Yes.
Okay. So from Women Who Code, our mission is to empower every diverse woman to excel in tech careers. So I'm sure starting out, a lot of us felt that we don't have enough support outside of our community. And I'm sure in most of our families, we're probably the first generation in tech. How many of you see that? Wow, see a few hands up. Most of us are first generation tech, right? So we don't have anyone to talk to or discuss about our day-to-day issues. So this is what we are here for. Not only do you have a community where you can talk to other women who code, like 3 of us here, 2 of the volunteers we saw down, but we also have a lot of events where you learn about stuff like this, like a public speaking workshop. Are most of you on our meetup group? If not, I can share those details later. Okay. So our vision is, I'm sure most of your vision, I'm sure most of you can relate to this, to have a tech industry where diverse women and historically excluded people are welcomed into the industry and thrive at every level. Okay, I'm going to go through these things really quickly. So some of our values are to always focus on the mission, to remember why we're here and what we're here for. We're here to support other women and in any way we can, every way we can possible. Also, design for inclusion. So we're an all-inclusive group, no matter what preference, gender preference, sexual preference, anything. We actually welcome male allies as well. So even though it's women who code, we don't restrict male members from joining our community. Actually, one of our tech leads who's not here today, but our tech leads for cybersecurity is actually is a male ally. His name's Precious. You can find him on the website. We also advocate for change. We also see that women are generally very subdued. They don't want to take up leadership opportunities as much as men, even though they're equally good at it. So, public speaking workshop like this not only helps us to talk publicly in a public space. And the last thing is journey forward. So basically, we want to celebrate little wins that we have. So if you do follow our Instagram channel, you see that we will be supporting every woman within our community if they get a promotion or if they change a job, they get out of a toxic environment or anything like that. Currently, we have about 320,000 members, but that's just not in Singapore. It's all across the globe. So we're actually a global community. You're from Korea. Did you see a woman who code in Korea?
I actually did not remember. When I was in USA, I saw it.
You did?
Yeah.
That's great. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Should I stand up here?
Anything.
Okay. Wow. Nice to meet you all. My name is Yeji Park. I came from Korea like 3 months ago. So I'm pretty new, and also I'm new to industry. I work at IRS as a full stack developer, developing intranet right now. And today I joined here because I wanted to improve my public speaking, also network with other. Thank you for
Thank you.
organizing this session.
Did you attend any women who code event in the US?
Because I was there during the pandemic. So
It's great. We're glad that all of your first women who code events are with us here in Singapore. Okay, so this is a bit about our code of conduct. Like I mentioned earlier, we're an all-inclusive group. We don't discriminate in terms of any preference, any bias. If you want to read more about our code of conduct, you can come to me later. I can share the slides with you, but I don't want to take too much of your time. These are a few of our other upcoming events. I can share the meetup link later, or if you guys want to take a picture, you can do that. This is also our website and our Twitter page. If you guys don't want to take a picture of it right now, it's fine. You can always find me, Toshal, Isha, or our volunteers down later, and you can get these details from them. So now about our speaker, Isha. Hello. Isha is our Women Who Code member, and she works here at Google as a solutions architect. I won't go too much about her. She will talk about herself later. And thank you so much. Without further ado, Isha. I'm sure
Thank
all
you.
of us can learn a lot, especially me. Thank you so much.
All right, let's see if this thing will see my face. Why does it do more? No, it's okay. I use this. Just need to switch my tab to go to the next one. Share this instead. Go to slideshow. I will done this so I can actually see my slides. All right. Can this see me? I think this can see me. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Like Kriti said, this is our first in-person event in a very long time. I joined Women Who Code pre-pandemic, and the world has shifted quite a bit since then. So very glad to be back in person with all of you here. And hopefully this will be a fruitful session, and I will see you all in the next two as well. But without any further ado, let me introduce myself. Like Kriti said, I work at Google as an advertising solutions architect. I've been in the tech industry now for 12 years. It'll be 12 years in August. So a little bit of a seasoned tech veteran here, dinosaurs as I was called in my first company. But I used to be a developer. I've done a lot of trainings. I used to conduct sessions for our global onboarding program at my first job. So that's where I picked up what I think are some of the skills when it comes to public speaking, and hope to share some of that with you all today. I moved to Singapore 5 years ago. I moved to Google 3 years ago. I don't write code anymore, unfortunately, but thanks to Women Who Code, I'm still connected to the community, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you. All right, let us jump straight into what we're going to be talking about. Does this look familiar? Before you go on stage, sweating profusely, reading your flashcards, like memorizing your notes, and you're just like shaking with fear. Don't worry, I got you. We'll go through this process together, and then hopefully this will not be you the next time you get on stage, okay? I should remember that there's a camera recording me, so I stay here. Is this okay? Everyone can hear me well? Okay, great. So before I introduce the agenda and everything, and my mother is calling me, so I will decline that. Let me start with just a little getting to know each other. So I want each of you to say your name and then say an adjective that starts with the first letter of your name. For example, My name is Isha. So I am inquisitive Isha. Okay? Everyone understand the game? Yes? You want like 30 seconds to think about a word? Tick, tick one, tick, tick two, tick, tick three. Okay. It's okay. I'm sorry, but I know we made you all move from there to here. But this is the only time I'm going to pick on you. So let's get started.
My name is Priya, and I just describe me as a
Okay, we have Playful Priya. Welcome.
Okay, so my name is Komal. So it starts with K, so I should come up with something that is K. I think I'm kind. I would like to
Kind
think
Komal?
that.
Yes.
Yeah, kind Komal.
Very well done.
It's Excel. So I think the first adjective that came is adventurous.
Adventurous. Okay, adventurous as well. Okay, social. I'm going to move to you.
I'm tenacious social.
Yes. Okay, Kriti.
I'm Krithi. My name also starts with a K. I was gonna say kind, but it's used. So I'll go with keen.
Keen. Okay, we have Keen Kriti. All right, we'll move on to the next level.
What's coming? My name is also Krithi.
So you can't be kind and you can't be keen. You have to be something
I
else.
can't think of it.
I'm sure you can.
Keeper. I'm a keeper.
We have a keeper. All right, move on to the next person.
Hi, I'm Prashanti. My name starts with P. So passionate crush.
Oh, well done. Okay.
Hi, I'm Haley. So it starts with H, and then I'm definitely a hungry Haley.
Love it.
Well, it can be hungry for growth, hungry for opportunities, and then always hungry for food. So actually,
I relate to that. I love food.
I'm Saiha. Adjective would be scared because scared of others.
Nothing to be scared about. We'll change that. If not today, over the course of the 3 sessions. Okay.
My name is Yeji, and I can start with Y. I was thinking of taking Young Yeji, but it's not true. So I'll just do Ye Yeji because I am excited about pretty much lots of things. So
We'll take young. You're only as old as you feel. So I'm 35. I don't feel a day over 20. My bones will disagree. But hello. Can come join me in front, or you can join social activity over there. So we're doing an icebreaker of sorts while introducing ourselves. You have to say your name and an adjective that starts with the first letter of your name. So I'll come to you. I'll give you 10 seconds to think while we go with this table.
my name is Vicky. I will take my enthusiastic here.
Enthusiastic EE.
Yeah.
so my name is Kate. The first thing I can think of is have a neat name.
Okay.
I think is
The X is a difficult one.
I just I know somehow I start with L.
Lovely.
I was quite
I'm sure you are. All right. Move on to the next person. Wonderful, Wendy. Dysfunctional. I'm glad you're embracing it. That's the first step. All right. Our latest arrival.
My name is Maithili. The one I can think of is magnanimous.
Oh, well done. I like the confidence. Well done. You're already, you don't need this workshop. You're already there. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for playing. We will jump right into the content now. So, few you can call them ground rules, call them rules of engagement, call them whatever you want. If possible, please try and minimize any distractions. So make sure your phones are on silent. If you need to take a call, that's okay. You just go outside and do that. This is not a classroom. So please don't ask for permission. We're all adults here. It is a safe space. I hope that's how you feel. So please ask questions, share your opinions. If you disagree with me, please do let me know. I love it when people disagree with me. And finally, please respect each other, respect what we're doing here. We're all here to learn, including me. So hopefully I can improve whatever I'm doing here with your help. So just please, let's show each other the same respect. All right. With that out of the way, before I jump in, I need you to do these two things. There's pen and paper on the tables. So pick that up, and this is for you. You don't have to show it to anyone if you don't want to. You can keep it private. But list down 3 things that you think you do well as a presenter and 3 things that you want to improve on. Doesn't have to be super detailed. Just this is, like I said, for your reference. So I'll give you maybe a minute to do that. Also, don't overthink it. So okay, what's good? You get done, just give me a thumbs up. Get that. Don't overthink it. This is only for you. I will not ask you to share it if you don't want to. So don't overthink it. Okay, I'm going to move on. If you haven't written it down yet, that's okay. Take your time, think over it. Even though I did not overthink it, but it's okay. Some of us can't help it. I completely understand that. The reason I asked you to do this is every presenter is different. Everyone has their strengths, everyone has their weaknesses. So the idea, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but the idea is not to, there's no one way to be a good presenter, right? So what I want you to do is keeping these things in mind when you leave here, when you try and practice whatever you pick up here, play to your strengths. Don't focus on the things you can't do or focus on the things that somebody else does that you don't do. That's okay. We all have our strengths and that's what we want to play for or play to, right? So this is for your reference. If you want to come and share this with me later, I'm not against it, but you can keep it private if you want. All right. The agenda today is we'll talk about what makes a good presenter, how do you keep your audience engaged, because I think some of you asked me that question when you filled up the form. How you can use technology to be a good presenter. We're living in a day and age where a lot of us are in hybrid work settings, where we have people in the room, we have people on call, sometimes we're presenting virtually. So technology is our friend. I mean, we all work in tech, we know that. So how do you use technology to make your presentations better? We'll talk a little bit about how presenting is different from facilitating. And of course, then I'll talk about the next steps. So, any questions about the agenda? It's good. You all happy with this agenda? Perfect. All right. So, take a minute and think about who is the best presenter that you have ever met or seen. And once you think of that person, I want you to tell me two things why you think they're the best presenter you've ever met or seen. Just, yeah.
I think my CPO because when he presents something, he is very energetic and he used to make like sense of humor. He used his sense of humor to engage with the audience, and we always have the full attention on the topic that he's saying. It's fun. It's not boring.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. All right. Anyone else?
I just thought of some famous person.
That's okay.
So I think of first person I think of is Simon Sinek. Yeah, because his research is original, so he speaks his mind. Sometimes what I like about him, he's very relatable. So he attaches his message to the audience. So you can't see that he prepares hard because it looks so effortless. But I know he does because he doesn't bring the same message to different people, although it all comes from the research of his books. And he's very humble at the same time. So he doesn't say like, "Oh yeah, this is how it is."
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've done this much research. Yeah, I think eager to learn.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah, for sure.
My CEO.
Yeah.
So he has a great talent for storytelling, how he connects like the facts and some of his experiences, and then he delivers an idea. I really love how he does that.
Okay, so the fact that he's telling a story and not just like boom, boom, boom slides. Okay. What else? There's no wrong answer, honestly.
Actually, with Isha thing, I just think of, I just said it because even I just feel it back. And then like the way you present it, like it's more on like the vocal tone and the way like it's confident about himself, and also the passion that you can feel it in there. So like that makes you drag your attention to focus on the topic, what is the understanding of the word that pronoun. So for me, like I'm really like his English skill. It's so faster for me. So for me, that's the thing that I want to improve.
Okay, fair enough. Anyone else? Maybe one more.
I think it's entirely ability to tackle someone or a rude comment or a conflict. So
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think derailments, that's a great skill as a presenter. And sometimes people tend to get thrown off when there's a derailment or when something's happening that's unprecedented, unexpected. So yeah, that is a good skill to have when it comes to presenting. All right. So keeping everything that people have shared here, according to me, there's a few things or characteristics that every good presenter has. And these are very general, big, broad terms, right? So I think you mentioned engaging. It's not boring. This person uses humor. They use their energy to keep the audience engaged. So a good presenter has to be an engaging person to listen to. People should want to listen to this person, right? The other thing, I think you mentioned that you can see Jay Shetty's passion when he's talking, right? That's probably because he's bringing his true, authentic self when he's talking. He's talking about something that he feels passionate about, and that's reflected when he's talking to people about it. So authenticity to me is very, very important. And that's also why I said that every person has their own skills and their strengths. The important thing is not to emulate someone you see, but to play to your strengths and be your own authentic self when you're presenting. So, for example, me, when I present, I use a lot of gestures. I use my body language a lot. I talk very loudly. That's just who I am as a person. I talk loud in life. So it's not my presenter persona, it's just who I am. There might be someone else who actually has a really soft voice. And that's okay too. You don't have to yell in order to be heard. There are other ways you can compensate and make people listen to you. So that's why the thing to keep in mind is authenticity. Being your own true self, even when you're presenting, even though you're on a stage, your people are looking at you, it's unnerving, it's frightening even at times, but being your true self will help you combat some of those things. The next one is aware, and that goes back to your point about heckling and sort of dealing with distractions or dealing with any what's the word? Yeah, it could be any sort of derailment essentially, right? So being aware not just of sort of expecting and preempting some of that, but also knowing when you're losing your audience. Knowing when maybe it's time for a quick break. Maybe it's time for an activity. Maybe it's time to throw it back to the audience and ask them a question, right? So you have to be aware of those things. If you're, let's say, in a classroom setting, then you're always presenting or you're always catering to the person who's at the bottom of the rung. I won't say the dumbest person in the world, but maybe the slowest learner in the room, for example. Some people might pick up things really fast, some people don't. So whose speed do you go to? You go with the speed of the person who's slower, because you want to bring everybody along. You don't want to just rush through stuff. And yeah, like I said, knowing when you're losing your audience, knowing when a point didn't land the way you wanted it to land. So that's, and how, okay, let me ask you a question here. How do you know if something you said has reached your audience and that they actually understand what you're talking about or they agree with you? Facial expressions, body language, yeah. What else? They ask questions, they engage with you and give you some feedback very explicitly. Yeah. What else? They're not on their phones. That's definitely a good sign. Exactly. Nod their head, make eye contact, write stuff down. You're like, oh, that's a good point. I'm going to write that one down. So those are very subtle things which once you become a seasoned presenter, when you've done it a few times, you start picking up on those cues. And this is one reason I love presenting in person, because I can see those things. It's very hard to have that in a virtual setting. So how do you do that virtually? How do you know how engaged the audience is when their cameras are off, or you can't really see what their body language is like? How do you do it? Use technology, exactly. So we'll talk about that in a bit. You use technology. So for example, Google Meet, I don't know if we can see it here, but Google Meet has reactions that you can use. For example, let me see. Does it show? Oh, it doesn't show there. Damn it. Okay, when you see the recording, you'll see it. So yeah, use technology. Use things like your hand raise gesture. I think most tools now have the hand raise thing, right? Use the hand raise, ask people to drop an emoji, ask people to put something in the chat. There are options, right? And the last one is knowledgeable. Now, this doesn't mean being pedantic, doesn't mean being arrogant about it. It means that your audience should feel like you know what you're talking about. So some of it comes from confidence. Some people can fake confidence. Fake it till you make it is a little bit of a tricky mantra to have, but it's not the worst thing. But then at the same time, you do have to prepare. Like I think you mentioned Simon Sinek, when he's talking, you know he's prepared, but it doesn't look like he's being pedantic about it, right? He's not being arrogant about it, saying, I'm right, you're wrong. So that's how your audience knows, and that's how you build that trust with your audience. Because they trust that you know what you're talking about, so they will want to listen to you. And this could come from prep, this could come from actually knowing your material, this could come from simply that you're talking about something that you have a lot of experience in. So I'm standing here talking about presenting and public speaking because it's something I've been doing for a really long time. I could present the exact same thing without knowing anything about the topic. As long as I do it confidently, you wouldn't know the difference. So There's a very fine line between being confident and bullshitting. It's a very fine line. And sometimes you can't tell the difference. That's where knowledge comes in. All right. What are your thoughts on this? Anything I've missed, maybe anything you disagree with? Yes, no, maybe. All right, everyone, if you agree with this, give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. See, feedback. You don't give it to me, I will ask for it. All right. Okay. So we talked about the fact that a good presenter is supposed to be engaging, right? How do you keep your audience engaged? What are some tips and tricks you all use to keep your audience engaged? Nora has this.
Get to know my audience first.
You have to know them first. Okay, how do you do that?
If I have anything before I come into the room, I'd love that. Understand not just the number, what is people beyond the names. And this also part of it, not just a good preparation. I think need to know how they learn because there might be people with special needs, and some of them will say it over it, some not. And so I want to tailor the way I behave and my message, tone, and the breaks to make sure every person benefits.
That's a really good one, like knowing your audience. And so, but that's about the prep, right? That's free. What about during? I mean, I'm not expecting an answer from you. To the broader group.
I think the first impression is important. So like start with a story or like interesting.
Yeah, okay. So you start off strong and you build that comfort level when you go in first. Okay. What else? Asking questions? Yeah, definitely. So the only way to make sure your audience is constantly talking back to you is to ask them questions. So, but exactly what I'm doing.
I learned from you.
Yes. There we go. This is already working. I love it. All right. What else?
Them into pairs, sometimes groups.
Yeah.
So they actually learn more faster each other. So it's not usually the one-on-one kind of like a traditional university lecture. Like you are there and you're the knowledge transmitter.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like passive receiver. So I believe like people learn, not I believe, studies say people learn from each other much more than the speaker. And from 100% that take them up to 60%. And I think it's nice for people to mix people also. Like not necessarily those who know each other.
Yeah.
Or those who are comfortable with each other, or those sitting at the same table.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll share a trick to do that, which we used to use back when I was doing these sessions. So usually people will come in and the people who know each other will sit at the same table, they'll sit next to each other. So what you do in order to mix them up, you start, let's say I want to split people into groups, like 4 groups, for example, right? So people just start counting off. So say, for example, if you say 1, say 1, 2,
3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
I will speak, but we'll just go with that. So you see, so then you say, okay, now all ones move to this table, all 2s move there, all 3s move there, all 4s move there. That's a very deliberate way of making sure that people aren't sticking to their comfort zone and staying to the people they know. And that's exactly how they get to learn from each other and not just from the people they already came in with. So that's a trick you can use if you want to shuffle rooms or shuffle groups sometimes. All right. What were we talking about? Yeah, how do you keep your audience engaged? I'm the one who's not engaged in it. Okay, so what else? What else? We talked about prep. We talked about starting off with a story, making it personal, start off strong. We talked about asking questions, activities, putting people in pairs, shuffling them so they get to meet more people. Anything else?
Do videos or media help?
Great one. Stole my point. But this is how I think you can engage your audience. The first and foremost one is to ask open-ended questions. Now, who can tell me what an open-ended question is?
One that doesn't have a yes or no answer.
Exactly. So a question that isn't just a simple yes or no. So, for example, when I say, "Oh, who can tell me A?" That's an open-ended question because someone says, "I can." Okay, tell me. Right? It moves the conversation forward. It's not an objective yes or no. Mixing different activities, so you can have quizzes, you can do breakout groups, so like putting people in pairs or putting people in groups. You do your icebreakers. You use the different kinds of activities. It could be something where people work in a group. It's something where people do individual work and then come back and share in a group. There's all these different things you can do. Incorporate humor. That one, I put a little red star against it because conditions apply. Depending on the topic, depending on the material, you can't, you shouldn't overdo it with the humor. Let's say talk about something we all work in tech. Let's say there's a major bug in production and you're, losing money every day, losing users every day. And you go in and you start like joking around. I'm like, are you even taking this seriously? So you have to be careful with it, but you can use it to make sure your audience is listening to you. That's a great gauge of when the audience is listening to you. Like they will either laugh or they will grow if they're listening. If there is no reaction, they probably aren't listening to you. Be like, that's when you think of other techniques to do it. Make it personal. Tell a story, especially when talking about, let's say you're presenting in a conference, right? You could have a lot of theory. You could say, oh, these are all the fancy tech we've used. These are all the research that has gone into it. These are all the tools over there. But what really pulls people in, what really gets people to relate is when you say, oh, this one time I was on this project and you know what happened? We crashed the production database. I'm sure we've all done it at some point. But let's say, crash the production database. No, what happened next? So you make it personal. You tell a story. You give people something that they can latch onto. Because otherwise it gets really dry. And if your material is dry, you lose your audience. They just basically space out at some point. I know I did. History was my most hated subject at school because my teacher had no idea how to teach the subject. It was just all memorizing dates and places. And I hated it. Until I became an adult and started reading history. And I'm like, this is really interesting stuff. Why did nobody teach it like it's a story? So yeah, you could either make something very serious, very dry, or you can stitch it into something that gives people something to relate to. And last one, what Toshal said, like you use different kinds of media. So if you remember, I started with that GIF of someone sweating in. It's a great way to get started. I love using GIFs. I don't know if these folks have, we had a group text. I don't know if I sent not many GIFs there, but everyone I talk to in text knows that GIFs are my secret super strength. I can find the right GIF for any situation. Not to brag, but it's true. So yeah, use different kinds of media. Use videos, use audio. For example, when people are doing a group activity, throw on some music. Or instead of you talking all the time, let the video do the talking. Use a GIF to make it funny and like break the tension a little bit. So yeah, you can definitely incorporate different kinds of elements over there. How do we feel about this? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, coming back to tech, we talked about this in the beginning, right? And then I think somebody mentioned like, what happens when you're doing this virtually? So, how can you use tech to make your presentations better? That's not how you make. I did not put a slide to talk about that. Okay. Like I mentioned, most tools that we use today in the workspace have a lot of these things built in that you can use. There's usually a chat box. There is a raise hand feature. Some of the popular ones have already incorporated emojis in there. Some of them, you can, I think you can do this in Zoom as well and Google Meet, that you can have polls, you can have a Q&A, you can do quizzes. There's a lot of these different things you can do, which work best, especially when you are in a virtual setting. Because then it's okay if you can't see people's faces. If they're engaging with the activity you're doing, you can do a Kahoot quiz, or you can do a Q&A in your chat box. You can say, okay, in the comment, put in what you had for breakfast this morning. And you start seeing people come in with their answers. So you know that people are engaged. For us, because we're in a hybrid model, it becomes slightly more difficult because you have to account for both. There are people in the room, so you want to make sure they're having conversations. But there are also people joining remotely. How do you make sure that you don't lose out on the people who are remote because you're only catering to the people who are in the room? And that's again where tech is more important. So we use Google Meet at work for obvious reasons. And it has something called a companion mode. Now in companion mode, your video and camera is off, but people can still react. They can raise their hand, they can put things in the chat. And sometimes you'll see people are actually having conversations in the chat. And maybe someone asked a question and someone else said, oh, actually, this is how you do that. And you can see people engaging. So the gist of it is use tech, use the tools available. There is plenty of options. So don't shy away from experimenting with different tools that you have at your fingertips. All right. With that, now we get to put our thinking caps on. I have a little quiz for you. So I'm going to put up a few bubbles on the screen, and you have to tell me whether or not that is a good thing or a bad thing to do in a presentation, or like when presenting. Right? Very, very simple, straightforward. All right. Drum roll, I already. Thank you, Dosha. I should have put like a drum roll audio in there, but I just used my GIF skills, or GIF, some might say. First one, you should have a lot of slides and make sure you capture every detail in the slide. Yay or nay? Oh, well done. Yes, don't do that. Why should we do that? Before I tell you. Why not? Good to have a reference. You feel like you're reading a PDF, it will distract your audience. What else? It's boring.
It focus on the slides more than the presenter.
Exactly. Slides are there to be a supporting tool. You're the main character, they're the side character, whose storyline the audience doesn't care. You don't want people to completely miss what you're saying and just focus on reading the slides. So, which is why it's also, when I first started doing this, the golden rule that was told to me is you should always have text and an image on your slides. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a good guide to follow to make sure you don't overload your slides with text. It can be there. You should have some text, ideally, because let's say someone gets distracted by something and they miss part of what you say. You want them to be able to come back and still, it's like, oh, what are we talking about? Oh, right, okay, it's on the slide. But you don't want them to just completely focus on reading the slides. And you also don't want to be the presenter who just reads the slides. Because you're like, if you're going to come here and do that, I can read it myself at my own pace in whatever way I want. What's the point of a presenter being there if you're just reading the slide? All right. You should use examples and analogies to explain a point. Yeah or nay? Yeah, right? Exactly. Yes, you should use examples. You should use analogies. And we talked about that because you need people to have something to latch on to. Analogies, again, can be a little bit tricky. Because maybe an analogy makes sense to you, but your audience is like, what? But that's where feedback comes in. You use it a few times, see if people relate or not. If not, you use a different analogy. So you live and learn. But yes, always a good idea, especially when it comes to tech concepts. And this is how we bring it back to what we do in the tech world. It's much easier to explain technical concepts using analogies and examples rather than the actual textbook wording of it. Because I don't know about y'all, but I don't understand walls of text. Like what? Give me the gist. Tell me what you're talking about and put it in a real world example for me. And that's how I learn. And I see nods around the room, so I'm assuming that you all are agreeing that that's a better way to learn than just like definitions and jargon thrown in. So yes, we should use examples and analogies. All right, next one. You should talk fast so you can finish in time. Yeah, good talk. Primarily because Singapore, we have people with different proficiency in English, right? If you know your audience might be people who don't have English as a native language, where English may be their second or even third language, you don't want to lose them. You want them to benefit from what you're talking about, right? So talk at a measured pace, maybe use simpler words, don't use too much jargon. If you, that's also a good rule to follow. That, oh, yeah, don't do that. That if you are going to use jargon, then there are technical terms that are very specific to what you're talking about, right? That are critical to the domain that you're talking about. Throw them on the slide, put it on there. People have different accents. Sometimes you might not understand the word the person is saying just because of their accent. Also, never believe anyone who says they don't have an accent. We all do. So you want to make sure that the message is getting across. And while yes, time is important, time management is important as a presenter, but there has to be a trade-off. You can't do both, right? If you feel like you're having to rush through things to finish it in time, probably means there's too much content for the time that you set aside for it. So maybe consider skipping a few things. Maybe consider sending some things out as a pre-read before you get to the session itself. So there are different ways of combating that. But yes, make sure you're catering to your audience and what the proficiency level might be, how you want to communicate with them in order for them to be able to understand. I've personally dealt with this. I used to talk fast so much because that's just how I talk. But then after years of practice, I have managed to slow down, hopefully. Yes, right? Okay, good. It paid off. So yes, while time management is important, don't have to rush it. You can schedule a follow-up, send out a pre-read. There are other ways of dealing with that. You should have an agenda or objective laid out at the start. Exactly. You want to set the expectations up front that this is what we're talking about. So I had an agenda and then it said, does anyone disagree with the agenda? Right? Because you want to set that expectation up front so people, when you walk into a meeting, and I'm sure we've all had this, right? You walk into a meeting, like, why are we here? What's the point of being here? This meeting would have been an email. So you want to make sure that your agenda is laid out up front and everybody in the room agrees on why they're there and knows why they're there. So yes, we do that. And finally, you should have a summary slide. Yay or nay? Yay. Yes, you should have a summary slide because again, you want to bring it back at the end of the session. This was our agenda. This is everything we covered, and you just tie everything back together. All right. Well done, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. Awesome. All righty. With that, I think we are at close to the end. Everything that I've said so far, everything that I've shared so far, comes down to only one thing. There is only one way to be a good presenter. Can anyone tell me what that is? Practice. There's literally no other way. You'll stumble at first. You might not do as well as you thought you might. You might skip a few slides. There might be technical difficulties. Lots of things will happen. But the good news is it gets better. The more you do it, the more you learn. It's the same with every skill, right? When you first started writing code, you weren't good at it. You wrote gigantic methods. You didn't know how to name your variables, which most of us still don't. But eventually we get slightly better. But you maybe your design skills weren't that great, but you got better because you practiced and you kept at it. It's the same with coding. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And this is a great time to plug in Women Who Code. You have something to talk about, come find us. We'll give you a safe space to come practice your presentation skills and to share your knowledge and your experiences with people. So find Kriti, find Toshal, Victoria, Dia. I don't do much, but you can find me as well. So all of us in the Women Who Code shirts, come find us. Anything you want to talk about, technical, non-technical, we're here for you. Give you that practice ground. And now to my very last point, which is presenting versus facilitating. So if you read the blurb we had in Meetup and the email that we said we're going to be talking about both, right? So what do y'all think is the difference between presenting and facilitating? Let's take a stab at it. I will tell you what it is. Just want you to think of it. Okay, let me ask you a different question. In what situations would you present versus facilitate?
Facilitate when you're not the main presenter, like you're kind of leading something.
Okay. Not quite, but yes, that's one option.
You need to come to a certain conclusion. And it depends, but like in the meeting, one of the roles of facilitator is to make sure everybody speaks, but also you need to make sure that you achieve the result. So you don't just come and it, but there's a tangible result. Or when people disagree naturally over something, and you might be the product owner or something, you don't have the final decision, but you need to make sure that everybody else comes to that decision, which you don't have.
Yes. So that is which one? Presenting or facilitating? Facilitating. Yes. Exactly. So you facilitate when there is a discussion to be had. You facilitate when you're, let's say, brainstorming on solutions, where there's a decision that needs to be reached. That's when you facilitate because you want to bring everybody in and arrive at a common conclusion. Presenting is more when there is exchange or at least transfer of knowledge, transfer of information. That's when you present. That being said, though, not every facilitation is presentation, but every presentation I had a great line and then I messed it up. I'll start again. Not every facilitation is a presentation, but every presentation can be a facilitation. Sounds interesting. What do you all think that means?
Facilitator might not always present.
Yeah, definitely. What else?
Presentation lead to presentation. That's a presentation.
Yeah.
But a presentation is never, when you're presenting, you're introducing ideas or, you're giving information that they might not already have. When you're facilitating, people already have that information. You just hear for like discussion or comment.
Yeah, exactly, right? So even if you are presenting new ideas or like sharing new ideas, you can still have already know and then make that a conversation. And that's how you make every presentation a facilitation. Of course, again, star conditions apply, but the idea is always that you want to have that two-way conversation. Even though I'm standing up here and you're all listening to me, I still want to be able to talk to you and get that feedback from you, get that information from you, or even get you to think about things by asking you, hopefully, the right questions and have you think of things that you may not have thought of before. Like hopefully, when I ask you a question about, oh, what makes a good presenter, you all thought for a minute and said, oh, I actually didn't think of it that way. These are the skills that I like about this person as a presenter. These are the skills I might want to emulate from this person as a presenter. So the idea of making it not so much a versus, but presenting and facilitating sort of a situation is by making sure that two-way conversation is happening. That you're bringing your audience along rather than saying, here's a whole boatload of information. I'm going to dump it on you and walk out of here. I don't care whether you get it or not. So that's what makes presenting different from facilitating. However, that being said, there is a whole separate set of skills that comes with facilitating. Things like, how do you make sure everyone gets an opportunity to talk, right? Things like, oh, you don't want a certain group of people to dominate the conversation and also bias everybody else who's not talking. How do you make sure you actually get a variety of opinions on the table, right? Sometimes you need that one devil's advocate in the group who says, actually, I have a completely different opinion, and that's okay. How do you make that happen? By bringing both to the table, but also how do you make sure that what this person is saying is actually relevant to the conversation? How do you keep the conversation on track? How do you know whether people agree or disagree? So those are the skills that come with facilitating. And again, like I say, with everything that comes with practice. I can give you a bunch of tips and tricks. I can tell you, okay, these are the things you should know if you want to be a facilitator. But unless you put them into practice, unless you figure out what works for you, those are going to be useless. Yeah.
So if you're a facilitator and you're trying to, let's say, arrive at a conclusion or a decision, will you be a third party person to be neutral to the entire situation, or at what point are you allowed to assert your opinion? Because for presenting, it's different, right? You're giving information and not have a conclusion. Facilitating comes with sort of, like you said, balancing biases. So at what point are you allowed to give your opinion, or is it that?
So, in my opinion, a facilitator should be unbiased and should be impartial. That being said, though, if you're facilitating a team meeting, for example, you still will have an opinion, but there you're playing two roles. You have two hats on. You have your facilitator hat, where you're being neutral and your job is to facilitate the conversation. But you also have your teammate hat, where you're saying, okay, we're making a decision about what architecture to use. This is my opinion as a teammate. And then let the group discuss. As a facilitator, you will not force your opinion on the group. That's not good facilitation. So short answer is yes, facilitator should ideally be unbiased. But you can have multiple roles in the same group. That is my last slide. So I'm going to put this down and open up the floor for any questions you might have. It can be something as simple as there are no wrong questions or stupid questions. So yeah, what questions can I answer?
Which situation we should choose the facilitate, and which situation we should choose present?
Yeah, it's a good one. You will keep in mind what the goal of the conversation is, right? So if it's an exchange of information, or where you're sharing information, you go more the presenting route. Like I think Kriti said, right? That when you're sharing new ideas, you're sharing information that the group may not have. It's more of a presenting. Or like for me, I work in a pre-sales kind of pre and post-sales kind of role. Sometimes I have to pitch solutions to clients. So that pitching will more often than not be a presenting situation, saying, here's a solution we have for you. This is the problem that I think it solves, and this is how you can go ahead and do it. But then I can also flip that around, saying, so tell me what problems you have at the moment. Tell me what are your challenges. Say they give you ABC, like, okay, to solve A, here's something that I can suggest to you. So you can still have a mix of both. It doesn't have to be just one or the other. Facilitation more is where you have multiple options of maybe you're brainstorming design decision, maybe you're brainstorming a solution. Maybe you just want people to arrive at a common conclusion about where to go for dinner. So that is more for facilitating, where you gather information together as a group and then you arrive at a decision. Thank you for asking that. Thanks. All right. What else? What other questions can I ask?
So like in that kind of shaking to implement the team. Then they are like a lot introvert here, and then like they don't like to talk a lot, and then so like you are the one like give an advice or leading the fishing. That's all like a thing.
Yeah, definitely. So you can lead the conversation. You can ask leading questions if you feel like you're not really getting anywhere, you're just going around in circles, for example, right? But also, if you have a group where people don't necessarily like to talk, it's okay as a facilitator to be like, okay, I've heard from this side of the room. I would like to hear from the people who haven't spoken yet. Or you can say, oh, I want to make sure everybody's being heard. So, yeah, you haven't said anything yet. What do you think about this? It's okay to do that. But again, I would say has to be done cautiously because people can sometimes get on the defensive and feel like they're being called out in a group. Or you can just look around the room and say, okay, he just shared this opinion. Can I see a show of hands of who agrees with it? And then you can see maybe two people don't raise their hand. It's like, oh, you didn't raise your hand. Do you want to share your opinion on this? So you have to sometimes draw people out, and that is also.
I was like, I think last time when I was like presenting that a lot of people like did not like to talk. So like I tried to call up them and then they are like getting scared and like this time they won't join.
I get that. I get that. There is a risk of that.
Yeah, need to be really careful like when you draw out the like very introvert higher person. But yeah, they do have like really good skill technical. So we need to hear like where's his opinion.
Yeah. So it's okay. Like you can say it that way, right? So it's like, I know this is your area of expertise. So I would really like to hear your opinion about this. And worst case scenario, people will be like, no, I don't want to talk. That's fine. You go and have a one-on-one conversation with them after. Can't wait them all. So, but thank you for asking that. Great question. Not just about presenting versus facilitating. If you all have questions about anything that we've talked so far in the last hour, I'm happy to. Yeah.
Better to like leave all the audience questions at the end of the presentation, or do you prefer to say like, oh, the audience, if there's any questions in mind, is presenting, feel free to raise this question.
I'll give you the consultant answer, which is it depends. Let's say you're running a workshop, right? And there is a certain amount of content that you need to get through in a given amount of time, right? That just must do kind of a thing. In that case, you can, if someone does raise a question or you want to check in, you say, if you have any questions right now, maybe write them down and we'll address them at the end of the session. But it's also presenter preference. For me, I prefer people ask me questions while I'm talking about things because I will forget what I said. So I'm like, ask me now while it's still fresh in my head and I can actually give you the right answer or at least share my opinion on it rather than waiting till the end be like, yeah, okay, what did we talk about? So, but yeah, it can be presenter preference. That being said, I will say it's good to continue to check in after every few slides or after every, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, because you're going at your own pace, but then you also want to make sure you're bringing your audience along. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. What else? Yes. I'll come back to you.
You're presenting,
May I actually?
yes, please.
Good.
So you're presenting an idea and there's obviously like one or two people who are against your idea. How do you deal with that? Like they try to start debating with you and you're trying to actually is that the idea for the rest of the people?
So there's two ways of doing it. One is you have the discussion with the rest of the team present and say, okay, we have these two opposing opinions here. Let's as a group discuss and figure out which one we want to go with. So you put like a facilitator kind of over there and have a discussion. The other is if you feel like this person's just derailing the conversation and they're disrupting the objective of what you're doing, you can say, okay, I understand you have a different opinion, but let's take it outside of this meeting so that we can do what we came here to do, and then you and I can have a conversation. So you, at some point, you have to take that as a presenter, you have to make that decision and say, do I want to let this go on? Is this beneficial to the rest of the group? Or is this person arguing just for the sake of arguing? Are they here just to disrupt and be the devil's advocate? So again, presentation skills, right? Knowing when to shut that down. And what I always do, if in fact one trick we use, not a trick really, but one technique we used to use is we had something called a parking lot. I don't, anyone familiar with the idea of parking lots? Okay. 1, 2, okay. So do you want to talk about what a parking lot is?
Yeah, something where you have a public stats. I think from a meeting or anything that's you don't want to discuss the meeting's agenda, but it is equally important that you talk about it. So you just take it. It's kind of like saying, let's take it offline.
Yeah, but it's overused. So that's, yeah, we can see. Yeah, the idea of a parking lot is to have a dedicated space where you have good things that come out of that discussion. You know that this is an important discussion to have, but it's not in line with the agenda of why you're there. So you say, okay, we're going to put it in the parking lot and we'll set up some time to talk specifically about that. So you park that conversation for later. Very useful, especially in team meetings and stuff, or like you're having a stand-up or you're having a retrospective and you're like, great point, not really relevant to what we're talking about here, but let's park it and have a conversation about it later. Yeah, sorry, you had a question, right?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, you shared earlier about how you started off speaking very fast. So I'm curious to know how you actually managed it, because I have the same issue, and it's like when you're practicing, it's okay, but when you stand up in front of people, your heart is racing and the words are following the speed of the
Great question. So how I did it is, I had a similar setting, but we had like a trainer-trainee kind of situation going on. So all the trainers, apart from the ones who were would sit at the back of the room in like one row, and they used to give me feedback at the back of the room when I started going really fast. So we had this understanding ahead of time among all the trainers that if, let's say, someone's speaking really fast, then they look at the trainers at the back of the room, they'd be like, just slow down. Okay. And then you like consciously slow down. So you're getting that feedback. Or like if you're talking really softly and they can't hear you at the back, they go. So it's like, you have to like project your voice a bit more. So feedback, that's the short answer is feedback. That's the only way. Practice with someone, practice with a small group of people that you're comfortable around and let them give you feedback. So when I say practice, it's not just practicing in front of the mirror. It's practicing with people, practicing your content where someone can give you feedback. You adjust based on, somebody might say, oh, this example that you're using, I don't think people will understand this. Do you want to use maybe a more common example? Or say, I don't understand your analogy. Or, oh, these words that you're using, maybe you want to use different words. Or a very important thing to me when it comes to practice and why you need to prep so much is things like the language you're using. Sometimes you might be using language which you don't realize, but can be either not inclusive, or it can be maybe you're using words that are offensive to people. You might not think they're offensive, but someone might say, actually, that's a little bit offensive. Maybe you should use different words. For me, a very common example is when, and this happens more with men, that when they're presenting, they're like, oh, the developer, and he will do this, and he will do this, and he will do this. Like, do I not count as a developer? So, and we're like, maybe you want to say they and not he.